Nintendo doesn't really shirk when it comes to expansion passes for their games. While the price of DLC can sometimes seem pretty steep, they really put their all into it. Games like Smash Bros. And Mario Kart have pretty decently sized DLC packages for pretty decent prices. Xenoblade as a series has no shortage of DLC. The expansion pass for 3 promises about the same things as 2. New companions, new quests, challenge battles, and costumes. And the one thing that everyone is waiting for, the big story expansion. So as long as the DLC story at the end has the same amount of content as Torna, it'll be well worth it. The little bits we've seen leave me hopeful for what we'll wind up getting in the end. But how does the rest of the pass measure up? Looking past the hype of Volume 4, have the other 3 volumes lived up to those great expectations that we have for Xenoblade downloadable content? Honestly, it's really hard to separate 2's actual DLC from the DLC we got as free updates during the game's post-launch. And this is probably the main thing that kind of downs people's feelings about 3's DLC. But let's take a look at the bigger picture. Xenoblade 2 was developed in about 3 years from what we know. It basically started right after X and utilized the same engine. From that short development period to the also half of Monolith staff working on this game, it's incredible what they managed to produce. That said, this game was the big, is this actually coming this year, on everyone's mind when it was announced. Now, 3 is in a much different place. We're barely a year out since it was actually announced and dated for September, then the game got pushed up to July. It's pretty evident that Xenoblade 3 is a game that had a much smoother development period, and more time as well. It's also entirely possible that Nintendo was sitting on this game for a while, waiting for a good time to drop it, since it seems like Nintendo does do that sometimes. In short, Xenoblade 3 is a much more polished game on release, and therefore didn't need the numerous updates with QOL features and whatnot that 2 got. Alongside these QOL features, 2 also got new blades to add to your party that weren't even part of the expansion pass. Meanwhile, 3 has received kind of nothing of the sort. There are some files in the game's code that indicate that maybe there could have been other characters planned to be heroes, but they just didn't make the cut. Again, these kinds of comparisons are never really fair. Xenoblade 3 does a lot differently than 2, and while Blades and Heroes are similar, heroes are introduced in very different ways from Blades. That could potentially be a factor in deciding whether to add new heroes as free content. In the end, while I think if you compare the two, 3 is a bit lacking in the overall content, I also think comparing them like this removes the discussion of the major differences between 2 and 3. Honestly, not really. Again, this is not including why I bought this pass, which is the big main story DLC at the end of this. I think that will make this whole pass ultimately worth it, regardless of what was in Waves 1, 2, or 3. Wave 3 offers a slew of new content, including replayable challenge battles, a new hero who can craft you unique accessories, and some new costumes. This is about the same as Wave 2, so let's talk about these a bit.
Dandy dandy.
Masha is the new hero for this wave. She possesses the ability to craft new accessories for you, provided you bring her the materials. These accessories can have all sorts of effects, but only one can be equipped at a time. Her class, the Lapidarist, is a healer that uses these kind of dual disc things that are pretty similar to what Mio uses in her Defender class. I'm not really the guy to ask about how in-depth this class is, or really anything about the gameplay for the accessories. I think the focus of Masha is much more in those craftable accessories, as opposed to Ino, who had a unique upgrade system. For the Hero and Ascension quests, I think they were mostly fine. This one was pretty standard and mostly distanced itself from fan service, whereas Ino's is much more obvious on the references. I'd say that, again, if you're a fan of 2, there's a bit more to appreciate here.
Linger in the endless now.
Now, the roguelike Gauntlet challenge mode is interesting. I've come to terms with the fact that I'm not really a big challenge mode person. There are times where I do like some challenge, but easy games and content have never really bothered me either. Replayability is not something I stress or even need in a video game. So you're definitely barking up the wrong tree here if you're expecting me to be excited for this one. It's not bad, but it's not really my thing. If you're into longer gauntlets of battles and you really enjoy the combat system of Xenoblade 3, then this is probably a pretty good investment. You can get a ton of random events and RNG elements that make each run unique. After completing a run or so, you'll be able to spend your new Napon stones on cards that will appear in the shop, as well as cheese mode. I didn't play this very much, but I had a decent amount of fun with it. Again, I think this is something that suits a lot of other people that aren't me. And when you complete the gauntlets for the first time, you'll be awarded these nice little throwback outfits that are little references, and it's cute. Even if it is kind of unfortunate that it's just one outfit in a recolor.
As far as grins go.
Admittedly, I don't really think coming back is all that vital. DLC like this has really always had that problem. It's why a lot of people wait till after all the DLC is out to start playing certain games. When it offers perks for a game you've already beaten, it's hard to create content that justifies the player returning. Granted, challenge mode does give you a decent reason to return. You can't totally brute force your way through the roguelike mode, which is good. There is a level of planning required. But if you're not in the midst of your first playthrough, or aren't planning to replay the game, there isn't a lot on the table here. This is kind of like the $5 DLC pack before the big one, in case that wasn't obvious. I'm sure that's what most people actually paid the $30 for. And I'm not trying to discount the time or effort the devs put into this. More to say that you shouldn't expect a lot of content coming from anything other than the big story DLC, as that's where probably most of the budget and time is going into. Regardless, this is ultimately solid for a short play session of Xenoblade 3 if you're itching to just get back into it for a little while. But if you don't have the itch for some challenge mode and roguelike stuff, then I'm just gonna say you're probably not missing out on too much here. But again, that's just my opinion. You can leave yours down in the comments below. As always, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things JRPG, Xenoblade, and maybe Nintendo related. The last few ones have done decently, so it's nice to know that people are interested in things other than Persona on my channel. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.